You have been misreading people your entire life. You thought the loudest person in the room was the most powerful. You thought the richest man at the table had the most influence. You thought titles meant authority and confidence meant strength. You were wrong. And that mistake has been costing you in every negotiation, every relationship, every room you have ever walked into. There is a map. A hidden map of human social architecture that the powerful have always understood and the masses have always ignored. It does not appear in psychology textbooks. It is not taught in business school. It predates modern civilization. Machiavelli understood it. Sun Tzu understood it. The Medici family built an empire with it. They knew that every room, every boardroom, every courtroom, every dinner party, every back alley contains the same 7 archetypes, and whoever correctly identifies them first wins every single time. Most people stumble through social reality like blind men in a crowd. They bump into people, they apologize, they get pushed. They wonder why life keeps happening to them instead of for them. Today that changes. We are going to lay out all 7 archetypes. You are going to see yourself in one of them. You are going to see the people in your life in the others. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The faces of the people around you will never look the same again. The question is, are you ready to see the room for what it really is? Archetype 1, the furniture. Walk into any room, a corporate meeting, a family dinner, a social gathering. Now look for the people who are simply present, not participating, not observing strategically, not building anything, just there. This is the furniture. The furniture is not stupid. That is the first thing you must understand. They can be educated, credentialed, even technically skilled. But socially, psychologically, in terms of actual influence over the dynamics of any room, they are inert. They occupy space without shaping it. The furniture does not initiate. They wait to be spoken to. They do not steer conversation. They ride it wherever it goes. If you remove them from the room would feel the same. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. The furniture is the man the ruler never looks at, not out of malice, out of irrelevance. Here is what defines the furniture at a psychological level. They have outsourced all social navigation to the group. They don't decide how they feel until they see how everyone else is feeling. They don't decide what is funny until someone else laughs. They are social mirrors with no original reflection. They are not bad people. They are simply people who have never been forced to develop a social spine. They were never thrown into the deep end. Life was comfortable enough that they never had to learn to swim. Furniture makes up roughly 60% of every social environment. They are the static, the background noise. They are the reason mediocre leaders feel powerful, because, surrounded by furniture, even a folding chair looks like a throne. Archetype 2, the performer. Now here is where it gets interesting. The performer has realized that social power exists, and they want it desperately. But they have made a fatal error in their strategy. They believe attention equals influence. The performer is the loudest voice at the table, the best-dressed person in the room, the one who laughs the hardest, tells the most stories, dominates the most airtime. They are magnetic. They are entertaining, and they are, in the truest sense, completely manageable. Because the performer runs on your applause, not metaphorically, neurologically. Their entire social strategy is built on extracting validation from the room. And a person who needs your approval has already handed you their leash. Watch a performer closely. Watch what happens when the room stops laughing, when the audience goes quiet, when someone challenges them. The mask slips, a flash of panic, a micro-expression of desperation. Then the recovery, a louder joke, a more outrageous story, a bigger gesture. Machiavelli warned of men who mistake the theater of power for power itself. The prince who needs to look powerful, he wrote, is already vulnerable. Because perception management is an exhausting, full-time occupation, and exhausted men make mistakes. The performer is the easiest archetype to exploit, not because they are weak, but because their weakness is on the surface. They have told you exactly what they need, an audience. Withhold it, and they will do almost anything to get it back. You know these people. You might be this person in certain rooms. Pay attention to that. It is expensive. Archetype 3, the recorder. Here is the first archetype that actually frightens most people when they encounter it. The recorder does not talk much. They ask questions, simple questions, casual questions that feel like small talk, but are actually surgical instruments. How did that make you feel? What did they say after that? Have you noticed that pattern before? While the performer is making noise and the furniture is filling space, the recorder is building a file on everyone in the room. This is social intelligence in its observation phase. The recorder understands something that the first two archetypes do not. Information is more valuable than impression. You cannot use what you do not know. And the fastest way to know something about a person is to make them feel safe enough to tell you. The recorder is dangerous because they are invisible by design. They generate warmth. They seem endlessly interested in you. And you, being human, interpret genuine interest as genuine friendship. It is not always friendship. Sometimes it is cartography. Sun Tzu wrote, "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles." The recorder is in the business of intelligence before conflict begins. They are not necessarily malicious. Some recorders are genuinely curious people whose curiosity happens to make them formidable. But they all share the same trait. They leave every room knowing more than they arrived with. If you have ever met someone who seemed to understand you too well, too quickly, who seemed to know exactly what to say to make you feel seen, you may have been recorded. Archetype 4, the architect. This is where the hierarchy fractures into something that most people cannot follow. The first three archetypes respond to the room. The architect builds the room, not the physical room, the social room. The invisible architecture of norms, tensions, alliances, and power flows that every social environment has, and almost no one consciously perceives. The architect does not arrive at a social situation and react to it. They arrive early, sometimes literally, sometimes strategically, and they lay the groundwork. They decide who sits next to whom. They plant a story here, a question there. They introduce two people who will inevitably create friction. They introduce two others who will inevitably create loyalty. By the time the performer is making everyone laugh and the recorder is asking questions, the architect has already determined the shape of what is possible in that room. Machiavelli was an architect, not of rooms of cities, of political systems, of the very concept of statecraft. He understood that direct power is fragile. The prince who rules by command rules only as long as his commands are obeyed. But the man who shapes the incentive structures, who designs the environment in which choices are made, he rules the choices themselves, invisibly, permanently. The architect does not need credit. Credit is a liability. Credit makes you visible, and the architect's power depends almost entirely on invisibility. This archetype is rare, perhaps one in every 30 or 40 social environments. They are often mistaken for quiet, agreeable people, until you notice that somehow things keep going their way, consistently, across different contexts, against the odds, and there is never a satisfying explanation for it. That is the signature of the architect, no fingerprints. Archetype 5, the Wraith. We are now in the deep water. The Wraith operates below the level of social perception, entirely. They are not just quiet, they are strategically absent. They do not need to be in the room to influence the room. They work through text messages sent at the right time, through absences that create anxiety, through reputations that precede them, through rumors they neither confirm nor deny. If the architect builds the room, the wraith owns the narrative about the room. They understand something that very few people ever grasp. Social reality is not what actually happens. It is the story of what happens. And the person who controls the story controls everything downstream of it. The wraith is a master of strategic mystery. They share selectively. They appear infrequently. They never explain themselves fully. This creates the most powerful psychological dynamic in all of human social interaction. The projection effect. When people do not have enough information about you, they fill the gaps with their imagination. And their imagination, shaped by their own fears and desires, almost always creates someone more formidable than you actually are. Julius Caesar understood this. He cultivated myth deliberately. He managed scarcity of access. He made audiences with him feel like appointments with fate. The wraith lives inside this dynamic permanently, and they are almost impossible to counter because you cannot fight what you cannot see. You cannot expose what leaves no evidence. You cannot destroy a reputation that was never fully formed in the first place. But the wraith pays a price. Total isolation. Not the isolation of loneliness, the isolation of design. They have been operating behind glass for so long that genuine human connection has become structurally impossible. They can influence people at scale. They cannot be known by a single person. Archetype 6. The Sovereign. Now we arrive at a level that almost no one ever reaches, not because it requires supernatural gifts, but because it requires the one thing that human psychology is most violently designed to resist: the complete death of needing to win. The Sovereign has transcended the game, not by opting out of it, but by mastering every level of it, and then recognizing that the mastery itself was the trap. They have been the performers. They have been the recorder. They have operated as architect and wraith. They have won at every level. And they have seen, from the inside, that every level is a prison with better furniture. The Sovereign walks into a room and changes its atmosphere without doing anything, not because of what they project, but because of what they no longer need. They do not need approval. They do not need to be seen. They do not need to win the argument. They do not need you to like them. They do not need you at all. And, paradoxically, this makes them magnetic beyond all reason. Human beings are profoundly attuned to need. We can feel it. We can smell desperation, insecurity, hunger for validation. It repels us, even when we cannot name it. The Sovereign emits none of this frequency. They are a social vacuum, and nature, as you know, abhors a vacuum. People chase the Sovereign. They interpret the absence of need as the presence of enormous value. They want what the Sovereign has, even when they cannot name what that thing is. Machiavelli never wrote about this level directly, because Machiavelli himself never arrived here. He was a brilliant strategist, a recorder and architect of genius, but he cared. He cared about Florence. He cared about legacy. He cared about Cesare Borgia's approval. Caring was his ceiling. The Sovereign has no ceiling, because they have no floor either. They are not attached to rising. They are not afraid of falling. They simply are. Archetype 7. The Mirror. The final archetype has no strategy, no design, no architecture, no agenda. The Mirror is a person who has reached such profound self-knowledge and such radical acceptance of reality that they have become, in every social interaction, a perfect reflection of truth. You cannot manipulate the Mirror. You cannot flatter them. You cannot threaten them. You cannot seduce them with status or money or validation, because they have burned through all of those currencies and found them empty. When you speak to the Mirror, something uncomfortable happens. They reflect you back to yourself, not with judgment, not with analysis, with a simple, devastating presence. Every mask you wear becomes visible to you in their company. Every lie you have been telling yourself becomes loud. This is why the Mirror is simultaneously the most respected and most avoided archetype in any social ecosystem. People orbit them from a distance. They speak of them with reverence. But they do not spend long periods in their company because extended exposure is psychologically destabilizing for anyone who is not yet ready to see themselves clearly. History called these people by different names. Socrates was a mirror. Marcus Aurelius was a mirror. Certain monks, certain generals who refused to become emperors. They are not passive. They are not weak. The mirror can descend to any of the 6 archetypes below when the situation demands it, but only as a tool, never as an identity. They live in a fortress of self-knowledge that has no vulnerabilities because it has no walls. You cannot breach what was never defended. You cannot conquer a man who has already conquered himself. Machiavelli spoke of fortune as a river that floods and destroys. He said the wise man builds levees before the river rises. The mirror does not build levees. He has become the river. The mirror is in front of you now. Where do you live in these 7 archetypes? Not where you want to live, not where you believe yourself to be on your best day. Where do you actually function when you are tired, when you are threatened, when something you care about is at risk? That is your true archetype, the one that emerges under pressure. Most of you are oscillating between the performer and the recorder. You perform in some rooms, you observe others, and in the rooms where you feel most insecure, you disappear into the furniture. That is not failure, that is honesty, and honesty is the first brick of ascent. The system around you was designed with precision. The school manufactures furniture, social media manufactures, performers by the billion. Corporate culture manufactures recorders who collect data for other people's architectures. None of it was designed to produce sovereigns or mirrors. Because the sovereign and the mirror are the only 2 archetypes that cannot be sold to, manipulated by, or incorporated into a system that needs compliant participants, they are terrifying to institutions. They are terrifying to markets. They are terrifying to anyone whose power depends on you needing something. If you want to climb, and that is the genuine question, because not everyone should climb, because most of the climbing is suffering if you want to climb, the movement is always the same direction. Less performance, more observations, less manipulation, more architecture, less control, more sovereignty, less strategy, more presence. Each transition costs you something. Moving from performer to recorder costs you the applause. Moving from recorder to architect costs you certainty. Moving from architect to wraith costs you credit. Moving from wraith to sovereign costs you ambition. Moving from sovereign to mirror costs you everything. The road is long, the road is dark, and most people turn around at the first hill and call it a mountain. But for the few who keep walking, the room eventually stops being something that happens to you and starts being something that you happen to. There are aspects of this framework I cannot unpack fully in a public video. The specific psychological mechanisms behind each transition, and the one trait that separates the top 3 archetypes from everyone below them. The algorithm has limits, but if this opens something in you, subscribe and step forward. The deeper work is waiting.